two leaders of the unofficial Beijing Students' Union who led the pro-democracy campaign. 22-year-old Zhou Fangsuo, on the government's most wanted list, had run away from Beijing to the safety of his home in Xi'an, only to be turned in by his own sister. In this new age of fear, not even one's closest relatives can be trusted, as the people's priority has become protecting their own freedom. As state television shows endless pictures of the arrested, handcuffed, often beaten, crouching and cowering in grey cells, this highly calculated propaganda campaign is clearly having its effect.
Beijing. The military also moved on demonstrators in the Chinese central city of Chengdu. These pictures are the first evidence of that. They were taken by a Chinese student and smuggled out of the country by Britain's independent television news. Witnesses said soldiers clubbed, beat, and stabbed demonstrators during 2 days of demonstrations. Unlike the demonstrations in Beijing, these had turned into riots. A whole block was gutted by fire, including a police station and a department store. Students at the Chengdu University are still boycotting classes, and many have fled the city to avoid arrest. The ITN correspondent who filed those pictures was arrested and interrogated for 5 hours today. He's now confined to his hotel room. Judy?
In this country, Democrats in the House of Representatives elected new numbers.
Student leaders on last night's televised Most Wanted list, they were arrested today. In a sequence which recalled Germany in the 30s, Chinese television tonight showed 22-year-old physics student Zhou Fangsuo in custody and said he'd been turned in by his sister. 24-year-old law student Xiang Yan was also arrested. He'd been one of the students at that meeting on May 19th with Prime Minister Li Peng. Outspoken then, out of circulation now. At Beijing Teachers College, a leftover wreath marks the spot where student leader Wu Kaishi inspired a rebellious crowd. He is still at large tonight. So is another leader who has not lost hope.
We still have faith to the pro-democracy movement. The leaders still have faith.
But for many, the only faith, the only hope lies outside China. The American Embassy's visa section opened today for the first time since the killings. By dawn, there were a couple of hundred people in line. It was somehow faintly reminiscent of the American Embassy in Saigon the last months of that war. Time running out. People who believe their lives depend on a good place in line. That relations between the U.S. and China could be broken any day. When can we go in, they all ask, fearing the answer will be, as it is for many, come back tomorrow. Patrols pass by now and then, as they do all over Beijing, just a reminder. But the last word today may have come from another capital. In Oslo, Chai Lin, the one-time commander of Tiananmen Square, was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize as a symbol of the democratic movement in China. Bob Simon, CBS News, Beijing.
From the beginning, China's movement for democracy and freedom was not just confined to Beijing, and neither is the current backlash. Chengdu, the capital of China's most populous province, is also under martial law. And Shanghai, the business capital, has plunged into a depression, both financial and psychological. Correspondent Richard Wagner begins our report.
The fighting has stopped in Chengdu, the only city in China other than Beijing under martial law. The day after the massacre in Tiananmen Square, thousands of students took to the streets here and burned a police station, the Central Market, and other buildings. Chengdu, the major city in southwest China, has always been at odds with the leadership in Beijing. Behind a huge statue of Mao Zedong, the authorities have stored the hulks of buses burned by the rebellious students. At the city's principal university, students say as many as 300 of their classmates were killed in the brief but vicious violence. 22-year-old medical student Liu Wensheng is dying. He was shot and beaten by soldiers as he joined the protest against the brutality in Beijing. Most of the students have left the campus. The few who remained were reluctant to talk to us, but one who did, when asked why he stayed, said, well, it's not safe at home either. Another said he thinks that democracy will one day come to China, but that it will take at least 50 years. The authorities are claiming only a handful of people all across China were killed in the uprising, but the young people of Chengdu are not buying what they call the big lie. The government has begun a re-education process here behind closed doors and on public posters. Young children are being forced into the so-called youth police. Here in the heart of the province, which gave birth to Deng Xiaoping, The iron fist of Beijing is once again in firm control, but its grip was briefly shaken, and that moment will not be forgotten. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Chengdu.
There's a desperate effort in Shanghai now to suspend reality, to convince residents and foreigners alike in this industrial center that nothing's changed here. Just look at the tranquility on the streets and listen to the sounds of the cranes, the construction cranes, carving out a new skyline, proving that the business of Shanghai is still business. Why, say China's deal makers, should those rumored events in Beijing make a difference?
To them, this is you just roll with the tumultuous events and get back on track.
But foreign confidence has been derailed by the Tiananmen Square massacre. $250 million of pending U.S. investments alone have been lost in Shanghai, according to diplomatic sources. Future deals set back years. And most American managers of joint venture factories are gone, fled at the height of the unrest. The authorities are even trying to shut down the few satellite receivers that bring Western TV news to international hotels, for fear the information could reach the general public. Inside China, in Shanghai, the government is winning the propaganda war. But the student protest leaders who've gone underground are not giving up, have served chilling notice they will not suspend the reality of Tiananmen Square. At the last major anti-government demonstration,